So here we are. It's finally here, the last story DLC for Doom Eternal, and the end of the story that was set up in Doom 2016. The Ancient Gods, Part 2. To say I was excited for this DLC would be an understatement. As someone who absolutely loved the base Doom Eternal, I have just been increasingly getting blown away with the release of the Ancient Gods Part 1 and the Super Gornest Master Level. I am absolutely enamored with the complexity of this game, its addictive combat, and its unrelenting challenge. Couple those expectations with the badass teasers and trailers put out leading up to the Ancient Gods Part 2 release, I was downright salivating waiting for the opportunity to play this final DLC. Like with my review for the Ancient Gods Part 1, I will give each level their own section. I'll keep the final boss and ending spoilers for the very end, and I will give ample warning before I get to the spoiler section, so don't worry about story spoilers or seeing the end boss if you don't want to see it. Before I get to each level though, I just want to address 3 UI changes that were made to the game. One that I don't really have an opinion on, and 2 UI changes that I don't really like. The first change is the main menu music. It's different now. I'm indifferent to the change. I wasn't really attached to the original main menu music, and I'm not particularly attached to this music either. I don't think it's bad, but I understand that some people might prefer one over the other, so hopefully it adds a setting to choose between the 2 themes to make everyone happy. Now, the additions I wasn't fond of. One change adds cooldown markers to your aiming reticle. They call it the race car HUD. I suppose this could be helpful to new players who aren't used to looking down for this information, but for me, who's spent over 170 hours in this game, I just found it distracting and cluttering. Luckily, you can turn this off, so I did. The other change was made to stunning enemies, mainly any enemy affected by the new weapon, the Sentinel Hammer, or enemies like the Marauder. They get a new stun effect and swirling stars animation above their head, and this goofy sound effect to signal that they are stunned. I don't really like it. I find it kind of annoying and unnecessary, and I wish I could toggle that off as well. It doesn't ruin the game or anything, and I can ignore it. But as someone who doesn't like the flashing glory kill indications either, I just would like to be able to turn this off. With that out of the way, let's take a look at the actual DLC. As always, I played the DLC on Nightmare difficulty. I played through it a couple of times. I have not yet finished it on Ultra Nightmare. The DLC picks up with a quick cutscene starting right off where the Ancient Gods Part 1 left off. Upon meeting the Dark Lord, you head out to the World Spear seeking an artifact that will allow you to reach Immora, where the Dark Lord is waiting for you. This level aesthetically looks very high fantasy, similar to that of levels like Exaltia and Sentinel Prime, with lush forests and medieval-looking buildings before finishing in a crystalline fantasy cave. I personally like this aesthetic, though I agree it is a far cry from the UAC or Hell. The arenas of the World Spear are all pretty open, really allowing the player to move all over the place to avoid attack and position themselves for the offensive. The World Spear introduces a couple new things to the mix. One new mechanic is meat hook platforming. I was really looking forward to this mechanic ever since Hugo teased it a couple months ago. There are these floating meat hook targets that you can latch onto to swing yourself up to other ledges. If you get good enough, you can skip little chunks of platforming sections and find secret things. Most meat hook sections also have infinitely spawning armor pieces, so it's a nice spot to replenish your armor before continuing on. I personally rather enjoyed these segments and wish there were more of them. I like the platforming in Doom Eternal, and I love the meat hook. I regularly utilize the meat hook on enemies to propel myself around levels, or give myself better aerial positions during combat, so using it for platforming felt really natural to me, and I wish there was more of it. I also wish that there were more hooks during combat sections. There were some arenas with like one hook that you could latch onto and swing around, but including a couple more could have really opened up some arenas to some pretty cool combat scenarios. Another mechanic is the escalation encounters. These are challenging combat arenas triggered by the destruction of a gore nest. They act kind of like Slayer Gates in that they are the most challenging arenas in a level. Instead of moving you to a new arena though, you use the same arena from the level that you are in. So I guess they function more like the gore nests from Doom 2016 in that way. There are 2 escalation encounters in each level, one that is mandatory to progress through the level, and the other which is harder for a challenge. Completing the first encounter will upgrade your new weapon, which I will get into in a second, and completing the second one awards you with a skin. These escalation encounters were definitely the highlight of each level, and were always the most challenging arenas in each stage. The level also adds a couple new enemies. The first new enemy is the Screecher, a new type of zombie that buffs demons around it when it dies. I honestly didn't find these much of an issue. The buff works similarly to the Totem, in which enemies move faster and do more damage. I found it best to just ignore them. Most of the time it's easy to avoid killing them, and therefore easy to avoid triggering their buff. If you do trigger the buff, treat killing the buff demons as if they were buffed by a totem and run out the clock. Eventually the buff will wear off and you can return to fighting as normal. Once the arena is complete, all Screechers will die. The second new enemy is the Armored Baron. These act similar to the normal Barons of Hell, except they have armor that prevents damage and are armed with a long-reaching flail weapon. These guys are fairly easy to predict. When they rear their flail, they will flash green, similar to that of the Marauder, shoot the flare, and their armor will break. And then shoot it until it dies. If you take too long killing it, they will regenerate their armor and you will need to break it again. I found the best strategy for killing them easily is to break the armor by shooting the flail with either the ballista or the heavy cannon scope, and then using an ice bomb to freeze them in place, then use the chain gun in turret mode to kill them quickly before they regenerate their armor. If you pull this off correctly, they should die quickly and you won't have to worry about them regenerating their armor. The third new enemy added to the level is the Stone Imp. Stone Imps basically act just like normal imps do in terms of movement and attack, but they also have an added spin attack. They also have much higher defense and can take more hits than the average imp. The best way to take these out is to use the auto shotgun. It melts them like butter, and killing them in this way rewards you with more shotgun ammo to use on the next Stone Imp. The World Spear also features these segments similar to that in the Blood Swamps, where a spirit dog lights a torch and you need to fight inside of a little arena. Stray outside that arena and you'll take damage. These provide a decent little challenge, but nothing too crazy. Sometimes the best strategy for these is to take a step outside the bubble to kill the enemies, especially like this one here, where 2 Mancubus spawn with this purple goo all over the floor slowing you down. Speaking of purple goo, it comes back in quite a few areas in this DLC. It's pretty easily avoidable, but can trip you up if you're not paying attention. As a whole, this level is pretty par for the course in terms of what we've come to expect from Doom Eternal. Fun arenas with lots of enemies. Lastly, this level introduces the new weapon, the Sentinel Hammer. Awarded to you by the Betrayer, the Sentinel Hammer gives you the ability to execute a powerful ground pound that stuns enemies in your vicinity. It can be upgraded to extend stun time, give ammo, and award large pools of health or armor depending on if enemies are on fire or frozen. It's a pretty valuable weapon and can change the tide of battle pretty quickly if you find yourself surrounded. You can recharge the weapon by finding charges around the map, by breaking enemy weak points, or by executing glory kills. It's not a one-shot kill weapon like the Crucible, but I still think it's pretty cool for a quick resource replenish, or as a means to open a way out, or to extend the time a staggered enemy is staggered. The second level was Earth Reclaimed. This level sees you returning to Earth that is beginning to sprout new life as fauna covers a city that was destroyed. This was my favorite of the 3 new levels in terms of combat encounters. I think this had the best arenas and the most challenging fights in all of the Ancient Gods Part 2. The second escalation encounter was especially tough because of the cramped arena. There isn't a lot of space to move around in. This level also introduces 2 new enemies as well. The first enemy is the Cursed Prowler. I fucking hate these guys. Their behavior is very similar to the normal Prowler, except they hit you, they will curse you. When cursed, you can't dash or jump, you move much slower, and you constantly take damage. The only way to break the curse is to blood punch the Prowler that cursed you. This is an enormous pain in the ass, and I can see this thing being the thing that ends many Ultra Nightmare runs in the future. The other new enemy is the infamous Chain Gunner that we've all been waiting for, or the Riot Soldier as they're called in the Ancient Gods. The Chain Gunner shoots really fast and has a strong shield that cannot be blown up by the plasma gun. The best method for killing these are to drop bombs at their feet, hit them from behind with a detonation rocket, hit them from the sides with a normal rocket or a sticky bomb, or chain hook them before they can get their shields up. These guys are really only a pain if you get stuck unable to hit them from behind the shield, otherwise they're pretty easy to mop up. Immora is the final level of Doom Eternal's The Ancient Gods Part 2. Immora is aesthetically similar to levels like Urdak or the Holt, but it comes off as darker, almost like an evil twin version of Urdak or something. This level is fucking epic in terms of visuals, especially the opening. It begins with this badass battle cutscene and then opens up into this enormous battlefield with bullets and lasers flying everywhere, dragons in the air, armies clashing in the distance, and mechs fighting titans. It's amazing, and I love just looking at this. The level itself is kind of more of what we've seen from previous levels, sections of platforming, fighting through enemies, combat arenas, etc. Nothing that crazy or too different. Honestly, I was a little disappointed with this level's escalation encounter. I was expecting something to be absolutely insane, and it was just kind of the same thing we've been experiencing thus far. This level has only one new enemy, the Demon Troopers, and these guys are a joke. They literally die from one hit from any weapon. You can insta-kill them with a meat hook or a flame belt shot. They do piss poor damage and erupt in ammo when killed. They're nothing more than weak fodder enemies, which is kind of disappointing for a new enemy introduced in the last level of Doom Eternal. One of my favorite parts of Immora was utilizing the meat hook to swing from an enemy on the ground to reach this ledge for an extra life. I just love being able to platform around in this game. Features from the base game and the DLC all return, like spirits and buff totems, spirit dog bubbles, and arenas with a bunch of different types of enemies to take care of. Every enemy from the base game and DLC return, with the exception of bosses. Before we get into the final part of the video, which will be an analysis of the final boss, I wanted to talk about something that is quickly becoming the most controversial thing of The Ancient Gods Part 2, the difficulty. I won't lie, upon completing it, my initial reaction was, is this it? I think a lot of people had the same reaction. It felt incredibly easy, certainly easier than The Ancient Gods Part 1 or the Super Gorness Master level felt upon their release. Those releases felt like I was getting my asshole kicked in. They were incredibly challenging and really pushed me to my absolute limit to master them. Now they certainly don't feel as challenging because I know what to expect from them, and I've improved a lot, but when they first came out, I was in for a rude awakening. I think a lot of people expected to feel the same way with The Ancient Gods Part 2, and that feeling is simply not here. I don't want to say that this DLC is quote-unquote easy. There are still some challenging parts, and if you break down some of the combat arenas, they certainly sound difficult on paper. Like this one, where you have to fight through a room of Whiplashes, Cyber Mancubus, Dread Knights, Barons, Carcasses, Prowler, and Cyber Demons all at once to finish it. This is an arena full of some of the most challenging enemies in the game. And this isn't the only one like this. There are many other arenas that send multiple Cyber Demons at you, multiple Cyber Mancubus, multiple Doom Hunters, hiding Archviles, etc. There is another double Marauder encounter, this time surrounded by Screechers, so you have to make sure that your shots are accurate, and then after you kill them, a Baron spawns. There are encounters with spirits to worry about, and new enemies as well. The Ancient Gods Part 2 has everything that should contribute to a challenging experience, at least one similar to that of Part 1. So why doesn't it feel like Part 1 did? Honestly, I think for most of us, we got good. I have 170 hours logged in Doom Eternal. I'm sure many of you have something similar, if not even more hours logged in. We've mastered the mechanics. We know how to counter every enemy. We know how to adapt to every type of situation. And as a result, nothing id could throw at us could top the initial shock of The Ancient Gods Part 1 or Super Gorness Master level. Because of this, adapting to new enemies felt quick and easy. Personally, I was definitely expecting some insane difficult masterpiece of piss frustration to await me, I was expecting rooms with buff totems, screechers, and possessed demons all together at once. I was expecting one of the new enemies to be complete and utter bullshit to fight. I was expecting a triple marauder battle with cyber demons on the side. But would that have really been any more challenging than what we got? Maybe, I don't know. Playing through this a couple of times, I can definitely see signs of what we got in the Ancient Gods Part 1. I just think we were ready for it this time. Now, they could have always made it harder, something unbalanced, or something complete bullshit, or like the scenarios I mentioned a second ago. But when an arena spawns with multiple barons, cyber demons, and doom hunters, while a bunch of fodder swarms you, it sounds pretty on par with what we got in the Ancient Gods Part 1, no? Alright, now I'm going to talk about some endgame stuff. If you don't want to see the final boss fight or the endgame story discussion, skip to the timecode on the screen, or use the timecode in the description. Okay, so the Ancient Gods Part 2 comes to a close with a boss fight against the Dark Lord. We knew this was coming. The entire Doom saga converges on this point. Id was hyping the boss fight up to be some crazy, insane boss fight with the likes we've never seen before. The best of the best, the next level. And it's a glorified Marauder fight. Look, I love the design of the Dark Lord, I love his mech suit, I love the idea of Doomguy facing off against somebody with his own abilities, but this boss fight is nothing more than a 6-stage Marauder. You keep medium distance, waiting for him to flash green, then you shoot him to stun, attack, rinse, and repeat. I found the most effective strategy to defeat him was to use the super shotgun initially. It's useful for meat hooking to surrounding zombies for quick armor supply, it can one-shot the spirit dogs he summons, and it can stun him when he flashes green. Shoot him with the super shotgun, then use the sentinel hammer to extend his stun time, then switch to the chain gun and fire in turret mode, dropping grenades when possible. This will melt his health. Just make sure to avoid his attacks because he will heal himself with every hit he makes on you. If he summons other spirit demons into the arena, use lock-on rockets to make short work of them. After destroying all his health bars, he dies. It's honestly not the most demanding or complex fight. It doesn't require a lot of skill, just timing to stun. And with an ever-spawning supply of zombies in the room, you pretty much have unlimited health, armor, and ammo for this fight, with little else to get in your way other than some weak spirit demons and the Dark Lord's sword. Upon killing the Dark Lord, Doomguy also seemingly dies with him, but not before delivering a badass stab to the Dark Lord once and for all.
Tell me, have you nothing to say to your creator before you strike him down?
This game ends with Doomguy being put back into the coffin from Doom 2016 and seemingly sent back to Hell until he is needed again. I know a lot of people are thinking this might be the end of Doom, but I don't really think so. The current lore depicts Doomguy as an eternal warrior destined to battle the forces of Hell for all eternity. The demons might have been cast back into Hell for now, but if the day ever comes where some other schmuck releases Hell out into the world, Doomguy will return to stop it. This series introduces multiverses and time travel-esque elements, and well, the story of Doom doesn't fucking matter anyways, so I'm sure id can think of a way to do another Doom game. Well, that's all I got for the Ancient Gods Part 2. It's a DLC that provided a fun experience, but not ball-grinding challenging like I was expecting. I think I still like the Ancient Gods Part 1 a bit more for completely kicking my ass and showing me just how deep and chaotic the combat in Doom Eternal can really get. But the Ancient Gods Part 2 definitely has its moments too. It's fun new platforming inclusions, its arenas, and its badass set pieces. The only thing I can say about the challenge, or supposed lack thereof, is that the Doom community got good. Doom Eternal as a whole provided me with such an amazing experience. The game quickly became one of my all-time absolute favorites and will go down as one of the best games of all time. It's a special kind of game that doesn't come around every year. A game that I will still be playing for the foreseeable future. Maybe it's time I finally buckle down and give Ultra Nightmare some real attempts. This might be the end for the arc set up in Doom 2016, but I'm sure it's not the end of Doom as a whole. Because Doom is eternal.